Find out who's going to be speaking at the funeral of Michael Brown, how arrest records can haunt you, plus our picks for Hero Zero of the week. All these stories and more coming up on The Rundown.
All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera,
Talent.
Ready, camera,
Record.
3, 2, 1.
Record.
Thanks so much for joining us. This is The Rundown, where we take a look at some of the big stories making headlines. I'm your host, John Phillips. Joining us from Washington, D.C. is PJTV contributor Michelle Fields. And right here in Los Angeles, we're joined by the columnist at the Washington Times. You can get her online at washingtontimes.com, Tammy Bruce. Now it's time to go to the top of the rundown, and we begin with Michelle.
At the top of my rundown, the beheading of American journalist James Foley. Foley was beheaded in a shocking video at the hands of ISIS militants. ISIS did this in retaliation for U.S. airstrikes on Iraq. They said if the airstrikes continue, they will kill another American journalist that they have in custody. Foley was taken hostage at gunpoint in Syria 2 years ago. President Obama said he wants to punish ISIS for the brutal murder.
Today, the entire world is appalled by the brutal murder of Jim Foley by the terrorist group ISIL. Jim was a journalist, a son, a brother, and a friend. He reported from difficult and dangerous places, bearing witness to the lives of people a world away. He was taken hostage nearly 2 years ago in Syria, and he was courageously reporting at the time on the conflict there. Jim was taken from us in an act of violence that shocks the conscience of the entire world. He was 40 years old. I spoke to the Foleys and told them that we are all heartbroken at their loss and joined them in honoring Jim and all that he did.
It's hard to believe that he's sincere when minutes after he had this press conference, he was seen laughing and smiling on a golf course, playing golf with a bunch of people. But either way, what ISIS did, I mean, the video, which I hope you guys did not watch, is just atrocious. And it just shows that something needs to be done with ISIS. They're not even humans, they're animals.
Oh, that's exactly right. You know, one of the criticisms of President George W. Bush when he was launching the war in Iraq and Afghanistan was that he would always stay the course, that there was nothing that could happen that would get him to deviate from whatever plans that he had. Well, let's see. We had an American journalist who was beheaded, and the plans for that afternoon were to go golfing, and he stayed the course and went golfing. There are now reports out in the Washington Post saying that the Brit that was one of the executioners in the video could have been a detainee at Guantanamo Bay that was let free by President Obama. So I'd like to see if President Obama wants to stay the course with Guantanamo Bay and continue his plans to close it when we know that when we let these people out of Guantanamo Bay, they end up back on the battlefield killing Americans. That's what the right was saying. And if this happens here, and I hope to God that it's not, because you know, I'm not rooting for bad things to happen to the country. But if this happens, we're right, and that needs to be acknowledged, but I have no faith that he'll do that.
No, and look, I mean, this is the same man who released 5 Taliban generals in the midst of a war that we all knew was ramping up and that this was going to be an issue. I did not watch the video. I think things like that are toxic for the soul. There's something, though, to be said about Foley's demeanor, which was extraordinary in the preparation for this. There's been one person who is a conservative who was attacking him for saying that America was his real killer. This is a man, of course, with he knows he's going to have his head cut off. He's under duress. People are saying, well, then why would he say what the terrorists want him to say? Well, let me remind everyone, in that video, which hopefully no one watched, was the other hostage. And I think that there is some concern here or wondering, and I wouldn't be surprised if Foley and his parents believe that Foley volunteered to go first, because the threat is that if Obama doesn't stop the bombing, that they'll kill the second hostage. And I think that there's a point where if you have nothing to lose, yes, you'll say, I'm not going to say whatever you want to say on camera if you're a terrorist. But if the issue is, if you don't do what we want, we are going to kill the other guy. I think that there was such composure, such a commitment. He understands that we know at the time that we would have known that he was under duress, Every hostage has spoken things that were untrue, and if they survived, explained just like Steve Santani when he was kidnapped by Hamas, converted to Islam and condemned the United States. And of course, he was freed, thank goodness, as was his photographer, and all of that. I mean, you do what you're told to do, and you know that everyone understands it. But of course, this is also not unusual. All right, this beheading, they're mass murderers. Yeah. Thousands of people have gone through this. And if this is what it takes for Americans to realize what we're up against, then so be it.
Michelle?
ABC's reporting that the White House did know about the threat, that ISIS had told them beforehand that they were going to execute him if President Obama did not withdraw all troops from Iraq, and that the president actually ordered I guess, a search for this journalist, and that they raided the wrong place and they weren't there. So I think there probably are some questions about intelligence. Why was it that we raided the wrong place? How did we not know where they were? But I think you're right, Tammy. Hopefully Americans wake up and realize how devastating and awful ISIS is. We keep seeing all of these stories about what they're doing to Christians and what they're doing to people in Iraq, but I think that this video has made it very clear the gravity of the situation.
There is also a report from CNN this morning saying that they wanted $132 million in ransom to let these guys out, which they use to fund their operations.
That's right. And it was good. It was the appropriate thing to say no.
Right.
I don't think anyone, look, the thousands more people that would have been torturously murdered, it was the right thing to do. And there's going to have to be discussion about that. Obama said that, or at least the administration has said that they had no plan to release the details or the fact that they had tried to rescue. Frankly, of course, if it had been successful, they would have revealed it. And in this case, I think they're trying to show that they weren't bystanders. But what it's done is it's shown him to be more like Jimmy Carter than ever.
All right, Tammy, what do you have for us?
Well, at the top of my rundown, a domestic issue here at home, a problem with arrest records, to put it lightly. Sometimes those records are not updated to reflect acquittals, or even if you never even were prosecuted. And what is the big issue with that, besides some personal issues? Well, that can result in big problems down the road. The FBI, as an example, has 77.7 million people on file. That is about 1/3 of the U.S. population. And this is due to the arrest records that exist at localities. You get on the file with the FBI, and if there is no follow-up with the disposition, or if you were never prosecuted or were acquitted, apparently those records aren't going to be expunged. So now notification isn't required from local authorities to the FBI. An arrest record can obviously make it difficult to find a job, get a loan, get housing, perhaps even get a federal job, any kind of political job. Some websites, of course, keep your mugshots on file, and you have to pay those sites. Thank goodness none of us have to have dealt with that. I don't know about maybe Michelle, Maybe she's had to deal with that. But you have to pay to get your pictures off those websites, to get your records removed, and then they keep popping up. Bottom line is, Americans don't realize this, and I don't know if this is something that the FBI minds, but for the FBI to have records of a third of the American people on file, designating them criminal, and that there's no follow-up and no real conclusion about the nature of where you stand, especially if it was an arrest you weren't even prosecuted. It should be completely disappeared. Not only is it not disappeared, but the feds have you on their list.
And theoretically could prevent you from getting a job if they do an FBI background check. If they do a background check on you and it pops up.
Or really anything in life now. Everyone, of course, is concerned about crime and with the economy. Michelle, what do you see when it comes to other issues down the road when it comes to this kind of a revelation?
Well, I mean, it can ruin so much of your life. Now, you can just log on to these websites, pay $50 and get a complete background check on a person, whether you're going to marry them or date them. A lot of people do that. They go and get these background checks. And imagine if you look at that and there's all this information about you. That's not accurate. I think that's a problem. And you can't get a job. You can't get a loan. This should be dealt with immediately.
Here's my problem. My problem is that American citizens can be prevented employment opportunities, or maybe a loan, or whatever, maybe a security clearance, because false information is in a database that the government keeps on them. Yet we can't link the ICE database with local and state law enforcement databases to deport criminal illegal aliens. That we can't do. But we can make sure to let your employers know if you were accused of a crime in the 1970s.
So if you're an American citizen, that's an excellent point, John. If you're an American citizen, you're toast. If you're a foreigner who commits a crime or is here illegally or is not shown up for your hearing, that information is not, or we don't even know if we've got your right name, you're going to be pandered to. But if you're an American citizen, of course, all bets are off.
Everything's backwards. All right, at the top of my rundown, we've got new news in Missouri. Darren Wilson, the cop who shot Michael Brown in Ferguson, suffered an orbital fracture and was nearly beaten unconscious before he shot Brown. That's at least according to a friend close to the officer. An orbital fracture is a serious injury. It's an eye socket fracture, and it's nothing that is small potatoes. Cops say Wilson's face was severely swollen. He was nearly beaten unconscious. The assistant police chief took him to the hospital for treatment. Wilson, of course, is a 6-year veteran of the police department and has no prior disciplinary issues. Now, Tammy, the eyewitnesses initially said that he was shot in the back as he was running away. The autopsy, including the autopsy that was done by the family, by Michael Botten, proved that not to be true. Either this happened or it didn't. And these are all checkable facts. Either his eye socket was fractured or it wasn't. Either he went to the hospital or he didn't. Either he was badly beaten or he wasn't. And also told in this report that was exclusive to Fox News, prior to the beating, there was also a struggle for the gun. And the gun actually went off in the car when he was trying to get out of the car. And we don't know who pulled the trigger of the gun as they were fighting over it, but then Brown walked away, according to this story, and then he came out and took his gun and pointed it at Brown and said, freeze, and Brown then turned around and started walking towards him and said, what are you going to do, shoot me? After he already beat him up and tried to get his gun? If this is true, and the physical evidence checks out with what we're being told, there is no way this guy can be prosecuted. No way.
Yeah, and I think the real horrible part here, and even a dereliction of duty, is for the police department itself, is that this should have been stated from the beginning. That this is not he said, that this is information that they had, that they knew, and yet it takes some kind of 2 and 3 secondary sources talking to Fox News. Now, if it was just the friend of the officer, I'd say let's wait, okay, because everything would be speculation. But in fact, that there is another witness who doesn't know anyone who explained of Michael Brown leaning into the window of the police car, and he says, I didn't see what was happening, but something bad was happening. It shouldn't have been happening. So we have a secondary witness that confirms the physicality of Brown in the window of the police car. But I am shocked that the American people have not heard any of this. So the police department should have had a press conference immediately saying, here is what occurred, here are the facts of the matter, and delivered it as officials. That very well may have stopped some of the demonstrations, at least maybe would have mitigated the Holder-Obama
you know what? I don't think you'll ever.
intervention.
I think if it happened at high noon on videotape, Al Sharpton would still be out there stirring up trouble. Honestly.
I don't think so. I don't. I think that if they had released this early on at the beginning of these protests and all the looting, I think it would have stopped it. To see, why not release pictures of the
I'll tell you why.
whose face is all damaged? Why not do that?
I'll tell you why. Because when the initial video was released of Michael Brown knocking off the convenience store, and I was watching MSNBC through the whole thing, and I was watching CNN, the protesters and the looters and all the people out there, the agitators, were saying that is not him. This is doctored video. He was wearing pants, not shorts. This is something that the police are putting out there to destroy his good name, to assassinate his character. And they didn't believe it. They literally did not believe the video. It wasn't up until the friend who was in the convenience store with him, knocking it off with him, and the attorney for the family confirmed that it was him, that the mob started to acknowledge that that was, in fact, Michael Brown in the convenience store. I think when there's a mob mentality, it doesn't matter what facts are out. It doesn't matter what videos are presented.
Yeah, once you transcend to that mob framework.
Over.
Yeah. And, this is also... Go ahead. I'm sorry, Michelle.
I think if it was released early, it wouldn't have gotten to that point that there would be that mob mentality. But now releasing it, what? How many days has it been? 9 days? I don't know.
They didn't even
9
release
days
it, though.
later, obviously no one is. Well, releasing information about, well, yeah, you're right, they didn't release it, but leaking information, someone leaking information about
but see,
what was
that's
wrong
the
with
problem.
With the cop.
The police department released the store footage with no comment. That was ridiculous. They have not released or confirmed. Well, they say they've actually got proof that Michael Brown touched the gun of the officer. Now that means probably DNA.
Right.
And so again, it would have been nice to have heard about this a week ago. It's an extraordinary situation. And I think that we're going to have a lot of soul searching about again, the Obama Holder involvement, the nature of what transpired, if we're going to let the mob rule again or not. That's the question.
And, I'll say this, too, to end this part of the show. Small police departments need to have better training to deal with incidents like these because you never know when they're going to happen. And we see it time and time and time again. LAPD, they've had their lumps, so they know how to handle these things. But what happened when Ronnie Chasen died? The Beverly Hills Police Department took control of that investigation. And Beverly Hills is an area without a lot of crime, so they screwed it up. And you look at what happened in Boulder, Colorado with JonBenet Ramsey. The Boulder, Colorado Police Department showed up. They don't have a lot of crime. They screwed up that investigation.
Good
so
point.
we need better training in these small-town police departments because in this case, I don't think they have a bad story to tell. I just think that they didn't tell it.
And they panicked, and I think they just didn't know what to do. And
I
here
agree.
we are sitting in L.A. and Washington, New York, is that we understand these things, and frankly, they didn't.
All right, now it's time to move on to Zero or Hero. This is where we pick a person or group for doing something very good or very bad. Michelle, you're up first.
All right, my zero is Reverend Al Sharpton. He'll be speaking at Michael Brown's funeral on Monday in St. Louis. Sharpton will also lead a march on Saturday along with Michael Brown's family on Staten Island. Sharpton has visited Ferguson at the request of Brown's parents. This is when it becomes a circus. When you have Reverend Al Sharpton out there, you know that this is just going to turn into a mess. He's just going to make this whole thing worse.
Let's remember, too, Sharpton framed a police officer, accusing him of rape. That did not occur.
Right.
Participated in that entire framework. That is a known fact. He's, to this day, refused to own up for that and to take responsibility for it. The fact that he's in a situation that involves another police officer who's doing his job, apparently, is a shame.
You know what's interesting, too? I was watching a biography on Morton Downey Jr., which actually you appear in, a clip of you talking on the radio. I think it was KFI at the time. And Sharpton was a regular on that show. And it was essentially, if you're too young to have watched the show, it was the Jerry Springer show before Jerry Springer.
That's right.
And Al Sharpton was a regular panelist. And Al Sharpton's MO would be to fight about Tawana Brawley with the audience. And when someone in the audience would scream at him, Sharpton would stand up, tip the chair over, and say, and I'm going to use a bad word here, but this is what he said. He said, "All right, faggot, come up here and say it to my face."
Yeah, this is
And this is a guy that now has respect. This is a guy who's delivering the news for NBC.
Yeah, there you go.
All right, Tammy, what do you have for us?
My hero is the Iraqi Muslim TV host who cried. He actually wept about the plight of Christians under ISIS. The program aired in late July. Let's take a listen.
هاي أنا اليوم يعني ما يعني أنا بكيت اليوم بالبيت بكي والله يعني
هذا عراقي اصيل ابو اي والله شوف
يعني أم يعني المسيح طول عمر انا والله كنت بالزبير بالمربد قاعدين بمنطقه بالمربد يعني اغلبيتهم مسيحي
صحيح.
دور النفط بالنفط والله العظيم والله وحقها نعمه الله ما فد يوم حسسونا بينهم يعني روحنا وناسنا وقلبنا يعني ليش يعني ما اعرف منو انتم حتى يعني تهجرون اولاد البلد. انا عتبي على اهل الموصل، عتبي على الحكومه، لازم تتخذ اجراء سريع بحق الناس يعني حرام.
You know, I think that this is important. Tens of thousands of Christians have been slaughtered and have been effectively genocided, pushed out of Iraq. It's a horrible dynamic. But what's important is, remember, Iraq almost doesn't exist now. The danger that those 3 men are in because of their position in a country that is upended to effectively state a solidarity with Christians. You might as well say you're stating a solidarity with Jews and against these mass murderers that are sweeping. It's like an army of 20,000 Charles Mansons, and you go on television and you effectively condemn them. This is what we don't see when it comes to Muslims, when it comes to the Middle East, Middle Eastern people having these conversations. And I think it was certainly brave for them at home and an important message for everyone around the world. Absolutely. Well, thanks to the internet, we get to see it. Exactly, exactly. All right, my zero is the woman who was heckling New Jersey Governor Chris Christie. Chris Christie showed her who's boss when she asked him whether he's allowed to play music by Bruce Springsteen. She also asked if he danced with John Bon Jovi in the Hamptons last weekend. Let's go ahead and take a look at the exchange.
I was under the impression, I thought I heard that Bruce asked that none of his music was played at your events because he didn't believe in your politics.
No, never did that. No, you're wrong about that. Bruce has never asked me to do that. I saw Bruce about a week and a half ago, and he had every opportunity to tell me not to. Just when I leave, just so we can have this lady be a little calmer, let's play Bon Jovi on the way out, so she's a little calmer, because I didn't dance with him. I love that. I know a lot of people on the right don't like. I like Chris Christie. I like the way he handles these situations. Well, I can see, though, that the lap band hasn't done much. Oh. Just saying. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. What are your thoughts on our picks for Hero or Zero of the Week? And what about the beheading of James Foley? We want to know what you think, so be sure to leave your comments in the comments section below. I'm John Phillips for Tammy Bruce, joining me here in Los Angeles, and Michelle Fields in the nation's capital. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.